Hi guys, how are you? Welcome to this channel. Welcome to this video. My name is Laura from Pleiadian Healer at pleiadianhealer.com. So today we're going to discuss the entire Jesus and crucifixion story and maybe tie it into Avalon as well. But focus is going to be on Jesus, which is Yeshua basically. So whenever I say Jesus, I basically mean Yeshua. I don't mean like this fake Jesus that was kind of created by the church or whatever. It's just easier for people to understand that when you say it's Jesus. Okay, so was Jesus crucified? I do believe so. Did Jesus exist? Yes, I do believe so. And I'm going to have the Jesus videos and Mary Magdalene videos back up on this channel too. But basically, okay, you have to see it like this entire group, because Jesus was part of a group, right? It wasn't just him. It was the apostles. It was his family, including his parents, his siblings. He did have brothers. I think he had like 4 or 5 brothers even. Like he had a lot of brothers. He had at least one sister, if not more. So it wasn't just Jesus. It was his entire group that he was surrounded by, which was quite large. We're talking about the core already being like these 12 or more people, and then with the family probably like 20 to 50, and then he had like more like another ring. It's kind of like rings around him, like the intimate circle, then another circle, and then yet another. So it's probably like hundreds or thousands of people, right? Okay, so Jesus was part of this persecuted group. And what's interesting to note is that this is not the only lifetime he's had where he was persecuted. Like persecution was a running theme throughout many lifetimes, not just in this earth realm, but also elsewhere, because obviously Jesus and his soul group came here on a spaceship or whatever you want to call it. However, they were all tricked to come to earth, just like souls are tricked to come to earth. Um, you know, he said the persecution and destruction was a running theme even on other places, like called in planets, star systems, whatever. Did Jesus know he would be made such a sacrifice? Maybe, maybe not. He had other lifetimes too. You know, there are several lifetimes he had where it didn't always end up that way, but persecution has been a running theme for that entire soul group, meaning all the other souls he was with too. So with the crucifixion, it could have very well happened around 1010 or whatever, which is more aligned to the real Lionsgate portal or whatever. There's a Lionsgate video up already on this channel where I kind of discuss how the Lionsgate is connected to Jesus' crucifixion, the way they're walking him from the Lion Gate to the site and all of that. Definitely check that out. I'm going to have a massive video out next year too, discussing the entire Lionsgate deception, how the New Age has hijacked it. But basically, it could have been closer to like what used to be, you know, October, which is Octus, which is 8, and all these different portals around there. I'm not sure it was really around the Easter time. Someone left a comment in my Telegram being like, oh, this is why Easter falls on different dates every year. It's connected to the full moon and this and whatever. But I'm actually not sure Jesus was crucified around that time at all. To me, it kind of feels it was a different time of year. So it could have really been around the October period, which is the 8th month of the year or whatever. It could have been like in the middle of the summer in Israel. I do think it was in Israel. I don't think it was somewhere else, but Israel is not what we see as Israel nowadays. So the Israel from back then, a few thousand years ago, or maybe even just 1,000 years ago, depending on the time you're in, the Israel from back then was different from the Israel that you see now, similar to the Egypt, the Jordan, the Yemen, all of that. Israel, I felt was more, there was more space. So it felt maybe even parts of Jordan were Israel, all of that, you know. So it was definitely like a richer country. He was crucified, he was made a victim, he was made a sacrifice. But, and this is where it gets mind blowing, he was able to kind of transfer his consciousness onto a different body, and whatever technology he used, because he was a god, you know. Basically, if you look at Jesus, they say he was a son of a god, but he was an actual god. Okay. And so him being a god to me means the gods were able to do that somehow. They still had the magic powers they have after Atlantis and everything went down. So whatever, however they do that, I am unsure. Okay, so it's some technology that we almost can't comprehend, similar to the technology they have that we were able to turn like 1,000 years old. There was just certain type of technology out there that's hard for us to comprehend, but he was able to transfer his consciousness from the body that was being crucified, which it was crucified for sure, onto a different body. The body could have looked similar to him. It was definitely a male body, not a female body, but it didn't look all the way like him. So when people are talking about he had a twin brother, all of that, these are all stories that got so mixed up and that are so confusing to people nowadays. There's a little bit of truth to it. So Jesus was a shadow of himself because of the way he splintered off. And he had to do things like baptize to remind himself of his own spirituality. So somehow he left a big deal, a big amount of his spirituality back in his old body. And they did end up going, so him and his soul, so he married him, Mary Magdalene, his kids, if his kids were already around then, I think at least one child was already around them, his family, like his parents, the apostles, which are the disciples, right? Like some of them are at least. There's a Holy Family site in Egypt, and the Holy Family are all of his helpers, basically. They're not just his parents. They're not just like Virgin Mary and Joseph and Jesus. No, that's not just the Holy Family. The Holy Family means all of Jesus' helpers. So there's this Holy Family site in Egypt where supposedly the first church or whatever was built. And I felt they did kind of flee through Egypt somehow and then made their way into all these other parts, like kind of over to France, to Italy, France, UK, which is a connection to Avalon. Jesus was still alive, just not in the same way before his crucifixion. So that's the huge difference, basically. So he's still alive. He still lived on to be, I think 900 years is what I got back in 2021. So Mary Magdalene turned like 800 years. And once again, we can't comprehend it with our mindset that we have now. We can't comprehend how Abraham was 200 and his wife was like 300 years old. We can't comprehend it because we don't have the technology they had back then. But I do think strongly we are able to live much longer than the matrix controllers tell us that we can live. I think we are definitely able to live at least 200 years in this lifetime. But back then, people lived up until 1,000 years or so. And were they giants already? Could have been. But there's definitely a connection between Jesus and giants, that he carried the giant gene, which he was a giant in another lifetime that happened after that. So they kind of went over from Israel to, I feel it was Egypt. And then some people who are misleading are talking about how some avatars went to India and everything. The avatars of Egypt are basically just clones and replications. Okay. Why did Jesus create those? Because when you think everything you ever worked for, this was like his life's work, not Catholicism, not the church, but Christianity overall. When you think you're about to be taken down, right? Let's just say in simple terms that you can understand nowadays, you think your YouTube channel is going to be taken down. What are you going to do? You're going to create replicas. You're going to create a backup channel, this channel, whatever. We all had it happen. So similar to that, he's going to create backups where he can store all the knowledge somewhere. And that's the so-called avatars. And so when people in India are saying, oh, I saw Jesus, he came this direction, they literally were just seeing an avatar or one of the apostles that said they were Jesus. Okay, so there's more to the entire apostle story. They say the apostles went into all wind directions and built up their own little churches, like apostle so-and-so went to Spain. That's why Spain is a spiritual site and all of that. One went to Turkey, one went to elsewhere. So the family and Mary Magdalene brought Jesus through. That's the only thing. Jesus left a past version of him on a cross and a shadow of himself in black. I kind of saw it like dressed in black somehow, made it out with family effort. His brothers dispersed in all directions. It was a distraction technique, but to share the wisdom. What do you do when you think it can all be taken away from you? You create clones and avatars and all of that. the trauma of persecution is real, and it was really real for Jesus and whatever was around Jesus. Okay, like all the people that were around Jesus, they were all part of the persecuted group. So it wasn't just Jesus, it wasn't just Mary Magdalene. All of them were persecuted. Why they were persecuted, I feel that definitely has to do with past lives. You know, a lot of people were persecuted. Like Julius Caesar was persecuted. He was like stabbed 50 something times, wasn't he? Like 51 times or whatever. Like a lot of people were persecuted back in the day. So he was persecuted because I feel there was a lot of past life karma and trauma carrying over for sure. So he created clones and backups to get the word out there because he wanted to make sure. So Jesus wanted to make sure, Yeshua wanted to make sure none of his teachings would ever be forgotten. So what were Jesus' avatars really? Apostles, imprints. You can't describe it in today's words. You really can't, because it's technology that they had back then that we've been mind wiped so many times from lifetime to lifetime. You can basically not describe it, but possibly some of these apostles were also imposters. Did Jesus ever recover, and how? I do think he recovered to a certain degree, but he was probably never his own self. So the most vibrant Jesus you are seeing is the one up until the age of what, 30 something, 33, until he was nailed to the cross. But Jesus did live on after the crucifixion, just not in the same way. He kind of looked a bit different. He was a shadow of himself in the beginning for sure. And then Mary Magdalene and also his holy family, they had to teach him how to baptize again, how to use all these spiritual things, because he had completely forgotten those somehow. Jesus' word carried in all directions, meaning India, etc. So many connected to him or think they are him. Okay, a lot of people think they're Jesus, as we know. There's this Australian couple that thinks they're Jesus somewhere in the outback. So it's confusing. It really is confusing the more you think about it. But that's basically what happened to Jesus. Just trying to go through these notes. So the connection to Avalon is basically that it came about a few hundred years after that. And I think Jesus was definitely part of it somehow, but there's this blank where we don't really know what, but it could very well be that Jesus was looking. So to me, it kind of felt, okay, he had to escape Israel because he was being persecuted. So him, his wife, Mary Magdalene, and the family escaped through Egypt somehow. There's a site, there are a lot of sites that say Jesus was here. A lot of people nowadays interpret it as him being there as a kid, you know, when they escaped the first time around when he was being persecuted. But no, I think he was there as an adult. He created Islam. I do think there's some truth to it. How, why, I don't know. It could have been that he just wanted another religion. But the main religion is Christianity. He definitely feels more like a Christian than a Jew. You know, there's a question of whether or not, because he obviously was a Jew somehow before being a Christian. Mary Magdalene feels more like a Jew than a Christian, but for Jesus, Christianity was like his life's work somehow. But the original Christianity has been hijacked, and so whatever you see in the church nowadays is not the real Christianity. The cross was hijacked, you know, like everyone with the cross, they're really deceiving you with the cross, with the entire cross story, which the cross story doesn't really matter that much. That's just another symbol for sacrifice. But the cross could have been used as identity or recognition between Christians, Christians, right? Okay, so to Avalon, it could have been that he didn't find Egypt would give him what he needed. And then he moved over somehow through Italy, France, England, which they were more connected back then, left his imprint. So people are saying Mary Magdalene's family, a lot of that is in Germany and in the surrounding countries. Similar to that, I feel like, because it's all connected, I feel like Jesus' family is like, a lot of it is like in those, you know, in that area. Like Mary Magdalene's like France, Germany, that's the connection they usually see. Jesus could have very well been Italy and UK, could have been France, Germany too, but there's like the entire descendants of Yeshua and Mary Magdalene, you know, all of them are still around somehow, or at least the imprints. So it could have been that Jesus didn't think Egypt would be that place to stay, and then kind of moved over to Italy, to France. And then there's this connection between France and England. And when I tap into Avalon, and Avalon is the most confusing thing to ever read on, because it did exist. The King Arthur tales King Arthur was someone who existed. When I read on it, it felt like there was a constant war between French speaking and English speaking people, whether that was France or England, or just the speakers, the natives somehow. I heard King Arthur being said in a French accent when I was tapping into it. It was almost like he was also well recognized by the French, meaning some French liked King Arthur. That's kind of what it felt like to me. So this is King Arthur from Avalon. King Arthur is all about the Excalibur and Merlin and all of that, which it highlights the superpowers that we've had, right? And that we possibly still have. I do think we have superpowers still, just maybe not as extreme as we did then. Avalon is connected to the Templars. The Templars were the ones that carried a lot of stuff. That you usually see them carrying this fire thing from England over to Turkey, but they were actually the ones who introduced the banking system in that way. When people are talking about the Israelite banking system, all of that, it leads back to the Templars. It's actually not that bad of an idea that people make it seem it is. There's more behind it, but basically the true Templars key, the true treasure, and the true secret they were guarding is Jesus is still alive. It's just not in the same way before his crucifixion. And there were literally wars being fought because of it. So if you reincarnate after that time period, after Avalon, you will enter a veil of forgetting, all the medieval age periods that we had. It was the darkest of times, and it was like a 1,100-year cycle somehow. Jesus sent out the apostles to create Islam. Islam in reverse is Mosley. I wonder if there's a meaning behind that too. He was afraid of being taken down. He was afraid of his teachings being taken down too. And basically, the Jerusalem chamber being inside of a British castle in England, together with the Abraham tales, already tells a huge connection between ancient Israel, or back then Israel, and England. Is the Tower of London connected to the Tower of Babel? Brit's Ain, Hebrew word, Eye of the Covenant. There's so many connections between the languages too that, are worth pointing out. But it's almost that Avalon kind of felt like there were something was on the land. So they were guarding a secret for sure. I think part of the secret was definitely that Jesus was still alive and that he was still around somewhere in England. Could have been Glastonbury, could have been somewhere else. But the entire King Arthur thing ties into it, because there was something else being fought about during Avalon, and it had to do with French and British fighting each other somehow. So that's, I think, the most that I got on it so far. It's very hard to put these visions into words, but intuitively, when tapping in, that's kind of what it felt like to me. Templars times, really important. Okay, so there's more behind the entire Templar thing too. I think I even saw myself as a Templar at one point when I was doing like a past life journey. I was like, oh, was I a Templar or a knight? It was really hard to tell, because sometimes they're the same, right? He definitely had the cross, though. I can tell you that much. I had like a cross on my chest in that lifetime. And it was like white with red somehow. So red is synonymous for blood, right? And white is innocence. So it already tells you kind of Jesus died as an innocent being, but he didn't really die, because he lived. He moved on to live elsewhere. So yeah, in short, I think that's what I wanted to discuss in this video. I hope it makes sense. There are still a lot of different puzzle pieces that need to come together, but just to give an idea of so many things that are interpreted wrong, and where people are just brainwashed into wrong, because the entire Bible is being interpreted in the wrong way. The entire Vatican, is keeping us down. Like all of these things, all the rituals, all whatever. So it was based on this innocent story, and possibly the cross being a form of identity or a form of recognition among people, but it turned into this whole thing where now it's a form of control and brainwashing and keeping people down energetically. Because if you believe in the cross, if you are part of the cross, you're part of this huge deception that Jesus died at the cross, which he didn't. He lived on after that. And a lot of wars have been fought in the matter of the cross, right? If you think about it too. And also the way people are not allowed to question their reality when they're part of the Bible groups or crosses. There's just a lot that goes into it. Okay, you guys. I hope you have a wonderful one and enjoy this video if you want to rewatch it. I know it's like a lot of information. If you have any comments, let me know. Subscribe to this channel if you're new, and talk to you very soon. Bye.